Thanks, Roger, and aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our panel discussion on Nānā I Ke Kumu, Helu, ʻEkolu. My name is Ku'u Ka'uanoe. I am a digital producer at Honolulu Civil Beat. Civil Beat is an online news organization dedicated to giving informed news to inform our communities. I am so happy to be here and so excited to introduce our authors and contributors of Nānā I Ke Kumu, Helu, ʻEkolu. But first, I actually want to say happy Indigenous Peoples Day to all of our Native brothers and sisters out there. I think it's awesome that we're having this discussion today, not only to learn from, these wonderful and knowledgeable experts that we have on this panel, but just to honor ancestral knowledge and bring it back and call it back to all of those who have passed on all of the talent and skill that went into this book even. So shout out, happy Indigenous Peoples Day. To get us started, I wanted to introduce Auntie Lynette Paglinawan. She has so much experience, valuable experience as a social worker and educator under the tutelage of the Venerable Auntie Mary Kawena Pukui. Her and her husband, Likeke Paglinawan, learned to differentiate between Hawaiian culture concept problems, which require Hawaiian solutions, and those of historical cultural trauma where Western training is used. She is a haku ho'oponopono, and just so great for Auntie Lynette to be here again to share all of her wisdom with us. Next, we have Dennis Kawahi. He is also a master practitioner of Ho'oponopono and also credits kūpuna Mary Kawena Pukui, Nahale Elu Mahuiki, and Auntie Malia Craver. His career spanned 40 years at Lili'uokalani Trust. In his endeavors, Hawaiian culture and language are foundational. Dennis values connections with the Hawaiian community and other Indigenous peoples in Hawaii and worldwide. We also have Kale Kanuha here with us. She was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii. She thanks her grandmother and her mother for their unconditional love, and she was honored to work on this sacred project by Auntie Malia Craver. She is currently an assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of Washington. And last but not least, we have the wonderful Imaikalani Kalahele. He is a Hawaiian artist, poet, and philosopher. If you've read Nānā I Ke Kumu, any of the other books before, you will notice that Helu ʻEkolu actually has original artwork and poetry, all provided by Imaikalani. He is the son of Rebecca Keliiolalo Kalahele from Waiheʻe, Maui, and Dale Alton Muerlott from Illinois, husband to Eunice, who I think might be there with him also, father of 4 and grandfather of 15. I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm so glad to get into this talk story. If you know, at Civil Beat, we have a book club, and we got to talk to Auntie Lynette and Kale about Nānā I Ke Kumu, but I'm so happy that we have all the authors and contributors here with us today. I just want to start by asking if someone can give us just a history of the Nānā I Ke Kumu series, why those books were written, who they were written for, and just give us a summary of what those 2 volumes were like. I think I'll start with Auntie Lynette, actually. You want to give us a little bit of history? You know it best, Auntie.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. I'm asking a lot, I realize.
Yeah. From what I can recall is that the director at that time, Pinky Thompson, realized that we were working with Hawaiian families and using Western treatment modalities. And although it helped, he must have thought, what's wrong with this picture? Because families came up with Hawaiian situations like, for example, a curse. In the School of Social Work, we had no training to deal with curses. And so the inspiration to be innovative and to provide staff with learning tools that they might better be able to work in alignment with the families and children that needed the help. And staff was interested. They were open to learning. And luckily, Richard Paglinawan was on staff at that time. And when he encountered the curse, his supervisor said, if you had the freedom to do whatever you wanted to, what would you do? He said, I go see my tutu. And thus began the journey, because Mary Pukui became the culture consultant of the Li'uokalani Trust for many years. And the valuable information and wisdom that she shared so willingly with staff and with other professionals was captured on audio tapes. And it led eventually to the compiling of the volumes Nānā I Ke Kumu 1 and 2. And it was years later, and I have to turn this over to Dennis, because he was still there. It's all yours, Dennis.
Lynette, well put. And the story about Richard that kind of launched our organization into seeking Hawaiian solutions for Hawaiian challenges. True. And all of us, at that time, we were young. You know, I started with the organization, I believe in 1970. And most of us were Western trained, you know, and it was a good training, but we also knew that there were barriers to working with our Hawaiian families. We didn't understand some of the cultural beliefs and nuances. So Nānā I Ke Kumu 1 and 2, and I know one of the questions you asked, you know, how does that relate to Nānā I Ke Kumu 3? You know, when we take a look at the books, it's almost like it's a more like a genealogy. I mean, from the first to the third, they're connected. Each has its own time and space. We all learned from Pukui. We all learned. We were young, eager social workers coming out of the 60s, where there was a lot of social change, and indeed, we needed that change in our own Maui culture. So Nānā 1 and 2 really set the foundation for not only us that were working at the Queen's Trust, but also a Hawaiian community who were setting their paths to find cultural relevance for themselves. And we're lucky we're a part of it. But the books themselves kind of represent like a genealogy. I mean, it's not something you just read, but it's something that people live, that is part of our history. Nānā I Ke Kumu 3, kind of the concept started when Auntie Malia was still alive. And she and I worked for the trust then. And we had some discussions about, you know, is there going to be another volume of Nānā I Ke Kumu? And we in no way or shape or thoughts felt that we would be the ones to do it, but we knew, like what Richard said, we went to seek not so much the answers, but at least the direction. And we went to see, again, Tūtū Pukui. And if many of you know, when you ask knowledge from the kūpunas, you just don't go straight on and ask them. Then they won't give you the knowledge. You coach it, you coach the question. So we went there and we asked her, Tūtū, how come the volumes were named 1 and 2? And she said, maybe you're gonna get 3. Simple statement like that. And she said, you, Malia, and you and Dennis, you guys go home and think about it, which we did. What she wanted us to do was find that answers within ourselves. If there's something you're going to invest yourself in at that time. This was about before she passed, I think it was in the mid or late 80s. So that was when the idea to develop Nānā III came about for us. And it wasn't until I think about 2000 that we started gathering people. And of course, the first person she and I talked with was Richard, who already in his mind understood exactly what he wanted. And we needed his counsel, we needed his participation. And from there, Kalahele was a student of Auntie Malia, and you know, and she told me to read her writings, which I did. It was wonderful, her writings. And as we went along, she said she's the one that should write it, and we all agreed. She had the skill, the cultural knowledge. Kind of in a nutshell, that's how the thing started. But really, each volume really offered Hawaiian families other options for their own health that oftentimes they wouldn't find in the Western system. It also provided them the good of the Western system, because all of us believe that we could bring the best from both systems to work for benefit of our Hawaiian families. Each book captures a different time. And we well understood that Nānā III would be the time we would have to capture it and make it relevant for today. Well, I think about 3 years ago, it's, you know, time flies. But the most important thing was we wanted this to be something for our Hawaiian families and for people that work with Hawaiians. And a book of this nature, you don't do it by yourself. There's so many people that have been a part of it. And we're so lucky to have them help us. Indeed, our staff, you know, our trustees, our staff, our Hawaiian families, those that have given us the privilege of being part of their lives in times of great strife. So that's, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of like the history. And as resources came, then we were able to, you know, start gathering the resources and the people that could put this together.
No, you definitely answered it. And I think it's a good way to turn over to Kalahele. I mean, I kind of wanted to ask all of you, you know, what intention did you bring while you were writing this book over how many years? And specifically, you know, what is one thing that you want readers to take away from this volume?
So you want me to answer? Cool.
Yeah, I wanted you to go first, Kalahele, because I mean, Dennis brought it up too, that you were doing all the writing and listening, and go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know, what I want to say is, first of all, what a tremendous honor it was to be a part of this, and it's a journey. I love, you know, Dennis's description of this as a moku auhau, but it was, you know, it was a pathway, right? So it was a really wonderful journey. It was challenging. It was hard. You know, we got impatient at times. It's like, let's go, you know. And other times we wanted to slow it down. So the pace of it, because it was, you know, it was almost 20 years before, from conception to the actual published copy. But there's two things I think are really important. I think one is that when you look at the model of Tūtū Pukui and Dr. Hardig in dialogue about Western and Hawaiian ways, in many ways, Dennis, Auntie, Uncle Richard, they in themselves epitomized that dialogue, except they had it in themselves. They were Western trained social workers, deeply embedded in their own culture. So it wasn't two different people conversing with community, it was inside of them. And so I think that was the part of this book that was very powerful, because they didn't have to translate across to anybody, because they had that translation inside of them, you know. And I think in some ways that's what made it a long journey, is because of the internal dialogue, and then the dialogue with our families and our workers, that made this such an important process. Like, I feel like that's another thing I would love for all of us to write about, is the process of producing. This third volume was very, very unusual. And it was so culturally bound. So I think what I would say is that this volume, as the other two were too, but I think, you know, with Imai's images and poetry, with Auntie's coda, her story at the end, and just the whole layout, the beautiful, beautiful job that Barbara Pope and her team did. The whole project is a gift to our people. And the other books might have been maybe more of a resource, you know, for workers or people working with families. But this book, just it's a gift, just as it is. And that's what I feel so proud about, is that it's not for workers, it's not for, you know, it's just for everybody. And I hope everybody will benefit from it, because there's something in there for everybody, not only Hawaiians, but non-Hawaiians too, yeah. So
I wanted to turn over to Imaikalani. I mean, something that's different about this volume is that there are your wonderful poems and illustrations. I'm wondering if you can tell us the process of, you know, creating those.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. Process. Well, I worked for Liliuokalani for 37 years, so I have an intimate relationship with Dennis, Auntie, and Nānā. So when it came time for the volume 3 to come out, part of the things that, you know, as an artist, that I was looking at is that there are no visuals, and with a volume like this, what kind of visuals do you have, you know, just to begin with? And I sat down and I just thought about just all the years that we've worked with people, we've worked with families, all the families that I've seen come through the agency, and all the relationships that we've had. And I just started to just to try and think about what kind of things we feel. How do we look at some of our problems? How do we express this in a different kind of way? So some of the illustrations are very simple, very modest, and I just hope that what they are is just something that people can look at and get another kind of emotional involvement in what they're doing. And with Nānā, sometimes I think you need a little bit of Lulu, where you just gotta go stir up the water a little bit just to see something, see what comes up and see how that impacts you and your family. So for me, that's kind of what the poems and the illustrations are. It's just my reaction to how do we deal with this, and what kind of a feeling do I leave with this wonderful volume. And, you know, I look at this volume as a masterwork, and I look at all the masters that went into putting this thing together. I'm just so proud to be a part of this in my own small little way, and to have my work to be a part of this wonderful volume is something that I think for me is really a gift that I can give. And I think as a Hawaiian, that's all I can do for my people, is to give them what I have, what I can give. And I hope that whatever I do in the book, people will somehow get something out of it.
Somebody in the chat say, the pictures and poems are beautiful creations that invoke imagery of the content, so you feel in the na'au. So I know. I also want to say to our participants, if you have any questions for the authors, we are coming up towards the end. So I want to make sure that if you have any questions, you can drop them in the Q&A or in the chat box, and I can read them off. I only have a couple more questions for all of you, but I mean, I guess I want to ask if, you know, this volume was about grief and conflict and how to deal with those with, you know, Hawaiian perspectives and with Hawaiian values. Is there anything that you really hope that the readers took away? I mean, I know that you already mentioned it's not really a how-to, but it is a resource in its own way. Auntie Lynette, is there anything in particular that you want people to take away from this? Just have to unmute again. Thank you.
The universal value that we in Hawaii refer to as aloha. You've got to have aloha, compassion. You've got to be able to respect all elements that we encounter with. And it's a reminder that we don't live by ourselves. If you live on an island, you get to have to deal with those issues of getting along and recognizing that a belief in the entity that provides life for all is a resource to reawaken in ourselves. And that as a lesson, we need to learn to not be greedy, to think of the needs of others as well. Recognize our limitations, but at the same time, do something about it to return balance in our lives. That is harmoniously done. And in Hawaii, that term is aloha. It permeates all aspects. I think that's a contribution we can offer the world. But it has to begin with each person recognizing it's not always what you want and want and want and want, but that there are others who deserve the opportunities to experience to a life that can take care of not just themselves, but for everybody. And like Dennis and Kalahele said, it begins with the inside. And it becomes a kuleana of the next generation to recognize that we're not on this planet by ourselves. But the harmonious balance in our lives is needed. And I believe that's what the book is all about. And so you cannot reach that goal if you don't begin living it. You gotta put it into your daily lives and pass it on to the next generation so they grow up experiencing this. And that's the kuleana, not just for me, but for all of us who live on this earth.